Welcome back. This is a place for quiet stories from the wizarding world, the paths Canon never walked, the choices that might have changed everything. Here, we take a single moment and turn it slightly. We follow the consequences slowly, carefully, year by year. If you enjoy these long, immersive journeys into alternate magic, consider subscribing and settling in. Now, let's start. Harry Potter drives the sword of Gryffindor down with the practiced precision of someone who has rehearsed this execution in his mind 1,000 times. Steel meets serpentine gold. The locket splits. There should be a scream. In the canon memory of the world, Horcruxes die loudly. A rush of corrupted air, a shuddering backlash of soul magic, that nauseating spike of soul resonance that proves the impossible has been wounded. In the Slytherin timeline, the blade bites, the metal curls, blackened vapor seeps out in a thin, reluctant thread, and then the room of requirement settles into a heavy, unnatural silence that feels less like victory and more like an autopsy performed on a corpse already long cold. Harry waits for the echo of Riddle's voice, for the psychic recoil, for the confirmation that this war still obeys the rules Dumbledore once sketched in careful diagrams across a headmaster's desk. Nothing answers. The wizarding world believes that if the boy who lived can destroy the Horcruxes, the Dark Lord will finally fall. This is their last desperate theorem, their final equation balancing prophecy against terror. They are wrong. In this timeline, Harry does not fail to destroy the anchor. He fails the schedule. The locket dies years too late, after Voldemort's soul has already adapted, matured, and partially slipped the simple arithmetic of 7 pieces, 7 anchors that Dumbledore mistook for law. By the time Harry's basilisk venom blade and methodical certainty begin carving through the Dark Lord's insurance policies, the magic underpinning them has fermented into something else. Less object, more ecosystem. The diary that once drank Ginny Weasley's life in a cold private chamber has had time, in this altered war, to finish its work and teach its siblings. The anchors have learned to lean on one another, to route around damage, to bleed into the ley lines of Britain itself, like a slow, malignant enchantment. Outside the hidden fortress of Hogwarts, the symptoms have been accumulating for years. Ghosts, once bound by centuries of precedent, flicker in and out of corridors they were never tied to, their chains of memory slipping, their allegiance uncertain. Bloodwoods that once recognized lineage with unquestioned authority now hesitate, misfire, or admit strangers while rejecting rightful heirs, as if the concept of family has been quietly redefined by a foreign hand. In St. Mungo's, healers stand over patients touched by Voldemort's newest curses. Wounds that do not close, do not clot, simply deepen in slow motion, as though the injury exists in a different, darker timeline than the body that carries it. Everywhere, the evidence whispers the same conclusion. The soul magic of this war has gone past Canon's limits. The anchors are no longer merely hidden objects. They are a distributed condition of the world. So when Harry destroys the locket and the silence answers back, the real question is not whether he has removed a piece of Voldemort's immortality. It is far worse. If a Horcrux is destroyed after that invisible threshold has been crossed, what actually dies? the anchor, the Dark Lord's safety net, or the soul of the tactically lethal weapon being polished in the dark. Who dares to strike it? Tonight, we trace how the clock ran out long before the sword came down. Redrawing Halloween 1981. The night the clock broke. To understand how that clock could ever run out, we have to redraw the night everyone treats as fixed canon, immutable, sacred. Halloween 1981. The fall of the Potters, the rise of the boy who lived. The moment the world believes Voldemort's immortality shatters. They are wrong. In Godric's Hollow, the sequence appears identical. James falls in the doorway, wand in hand, courage irrelevant against a wizard who has already disassembled his own humanity. Lily stands before the crib, offers the same impossible bargain, and for a heartbeat, the house is suspended between love and annihilation. Yet in this timeline, Voldemort does not arrive with only a killing curse and arrogance. He arrives with an experiment, layered invisibly into the emerald arc of Avada Kedavra is a second structure, a braided ritual he has been refining since the diary and the ring, a networked soul binding meant to link his existing Horcruxes into a single humming system. He calls it, in the private language of a man who thinks in runes and equations, the soul resonance lattice, a web of echoed fragments designed to let each anchor feed, stabilize, and, crucially, mature the others. Canon treats Horcruxes as static abominations, created, hidden, then patiently waiting for destruction. The diary in the chamber already disproves this, quietly drinking Ginny Weasley's life to give Tom Riddle molecular density. In this darker architecture, that tendency is formalized. The lattice allows the diary, the ring, the cup, the locket, and the rest to share strength across distance, smoothing the jagged edges of Voldemort's soul, teaching each piece to function with less dependence on any single vessel. Lily's sacrifice still detonates the curse. The nursery still explodes into light, and Voldemort's body still burns away into screaming ash. But instead of collapsing into the ragged, starving wraith the books describe, the displaced core of his soul falls backward into the lattice. It catches him. It flexes. It learns. Those fragments, once merely shattered, begin a slow process of self-correction, adjusting to operate as a distributed network rather than a row of fragile safes. Harry is still struck, still marked, still made into an unintended Horcrux. But in this Slytherin timeline, he is not just another container. He is the keystone node of the lattice, the only anchor forged at the exact intersection of sacrificial protection and killing intent. His continued heartbeat becomes a metronome for the system. Every year he lives, the resonance between the anchors deepens. The web grows more efficient, more independent, more tactically lethal. From that Halloween onward, the clock begins. With each passing year, the Horcruxes remain intact. The soul resonance lattice thickens into a fortress of distributed immortality. Somewhere beyond Dumbledore's calculations lies an invisible threshold, after which destroying a single anchor does not meaningfully weaken Voldemort at all. It merely shudders the network and risks snapping back along the connection to the attacker. By the time Harry first learns the word Horcrux, the question is no longer whether they can be destroyed. It is whether they can still be destroyed without destroying him. And in this timeline, that answer comes far too late. a childhood under a shadowed clock, Harry's delayed destiny. Harry Potter still grows up at number 4, Privet Drive, but the misery the wizarding world imagines for him is almost mercifully bland by comparison. They are wrong. In this timeline, the cupboard under the stairs is not just a symbol of neglect. It is a pressure chamber where a Horcrux network slowly wakes up inside a child's skull. The first signs are dismissed as freakishness, yet even by Canon standards, they are wrong, sharpened, predatory. At the zoo, the glass in front of the boa constrictor does not simply vanish, it slumps, liquefies, and steams, leaving a warped, smoking rim that later baffles Muggle inspectors. When Dudley and his gang corner Harry behind the bins at school, they do not merely trip. For 3 heartbeats, they feel a bone-deep, graveyard cold, as if something vast and unseen has looked through Harry's eyes and weighed their souls. Then, it is gone. The bruises remain. The terror lingers. What no one can name yet is the soul resonance. Each accidental outburst is not a single boy's magic misfiring. It is a chord struck across a distributed consciousness. At night, Harry dreams not of flying motorcycles, but of corridors lined with mirrors, stretching into a vanishing point. In every reflection, he is slightly different. Older, paler, crowned, bleeding. And behind them all, something watches with methodical certainty. Sometimes he wakes with half-remembered whispers in languages he does not know, syllables that taste like ash and old Latin, fading into the silence of Privet Drive. The Dursleys misinterpret his quiet as submission. Again, they are wrong. Under the weight of their contempt, Harry's emotional landscape polarizes into brutal extremes. A white-hot, choking rage when Uncle Vernon's hand closes on his collar. A ferocious protectiveness when a teacher bothers to pronounce his name gently, when a neighbor offers him an extra biscuit. Each spike of hatred, of loyalty, throws faint, unseen ripples through Voldemort's scattered soul. The lattice notes its own reflection in him and tightens. Every time Harry survives a crisis, the network calibrates as if a weapon being polished in the dark is being tested against minor impact. One memory in particular becomes an anchor. In front of that melted pain at the zoo, the boa constrictor does not simply slither away. It pauses, coils back, and meets his gaze with uncanny stillness. The words that leave Harry's mouth are not English, yet they feel native, a low sibilant exchange about cages and watchers, and the taste of air. For the first time in his life he feels understood, as though another creature recognizes the bars he cannot see. Parseltongue, in this Slytherin timeline, is not a quirky revelation at 11. It is the first symptom that his mind is already a junction in a wider, darker circuit. By the time Hagrid arrives with a letter and a birthday cake, Harry has been quietly cultivated, not by a loving guardian in some alpine fortress, but by a disembodied architect whose war plans now include a boy who thinks he is free. The clock is already ticking faster than anyone realizes, and the first time Harry destroys a Horcrux, the lattice will answer. The question is not whether he can survive that answer. It is what will wake up inside him when he tries. Horcruxes as living systems, when anchors start to grow. To understand what too late means, You have to stop thinking of Horcruxes as haunted objects and start treating them as living systems. The wizarding world treats them as cursed trinkets, static anchors hammered into reality. They are wrong. Canon already betrays the truth. In the Chamber of Secrets, the diary does not simply possess Ginny. It begins reconstructing a 16-year-old Tom Riddle from her life force, condensing from ink and memory into a body that can hold a wand, sneer, and almost kill Harry. That is not a passive anchor. That is an embryonic soul construct, a weapon being polished in the dark, learning to walk. In this timeline, Harry and Hermione give that process language. They map Horcrux behavior into phases, the way unspeakables might chart a contagion. The initial phase is fragile. The anchor is newly forged, the soul fragment thin and screaming, easily unraveled by sufficiently corrosive magic. Basilisk venom, fiend fire, the sword of Gryffindor, once it has drunk enough venom to carry that resonance. At this stage, destroying the Horcrux is almost surgical. A clean subtraction. The lattice loses a node, but time and proximity to fear, blood, and ambient magic push each anchor into an adaptive state. Here, the Horcrux listens. It absorbs emotional imprints from its environment, refines its soul resonance, and begins to experiment with projection. Whispers in the mind, pages that write back, a locket that tightens when you think of failure. It is still killable, but it has started to learn you as you study it, tuning itself to the vulnerabilities of anyone who dares to touch it. Then comes the mature state, the phase no one in canon quite lives long enough to document. In maturity, the Horcrux becomes partially self-sustaining, a dark citadel wired into the broader network of Voldemort's being. It no longer merely houses a slice of soul, it grows conduits, soul roads, that let the main consciousness shunt damage, pain, and even fragments of identity along the chain. Attacking such a Horcrux is not an isolated strike. It is an air raid on a decoy, while the real command center has already moved underground. This is where the maturation threshold matters. Once an anchor has fed enough, on Hogwarts itself in the diary's case, on the war-torn atmosphere of Britain in the lockets, destroying it no longer removes a discrete fragment. The lattice reroutes, offloading the shock into the nearest compatible soul. Often, that is the attacker. In the Slytherin timeline, too late means the Horcrux has become a masterpiece to be molded into someone else. The cost is psychological before it is lethal. Those who strike a mature Horcrux do not simply feel tired. They stagger under intrusive memories that are not theirs. Personality bleed that erodes their certainties. Sudden surges of alien rage or cold, methodical certainty. For a heartbeat, they see the world through Voldemort's hierarchy of worth. The anchor, dying, tries to re-anchor into them. The first time Harry experiences this, he does not merely destroy a Horcrux, he walks away, carrying its echo. And the war inside his mind becomes as tactically lethal as the war outside. Year 2 rewritten, the diary that lived too long. That echo follows him into second year. It is the reason too late becomes more than a tragic phrase. It becomes a structural flaw in the world's defense against Voldemort. In the canonical narrative, the Chamber of Secrets is a closed loop. Harry descends, kills the basilisk, stabs the diary, rescues the girl, and the school resets. They are wrong. In this timeline, the loop frays at the critical moment, and the diary survives just long enough to become tactically lethal. The descent is the same at first. The wet stone, Ginny's cooling body, Riddle's smug monologue coiling through the air like smoke. The basilisk still comes, still dies screaming on the end of the Gryffindor sword. Harry still feels venom burn through his veins as he drives the blade upward. But Fawkes is late. The Phoenix does not arrive in time to weep healing into the wound, and when Harry collapses, the sword clatters away, its basilisk venom edge skidding out of reach, leaving the diary unmarked on the flooded floor. Riddle feels the opening with predatory clarity. Ginny's life force has already given him translucence, definition, a quasi-body. The basilisk's death floods the chamber with ancient Slytherin magic and fresh, resonant venom. While Harry convulses, Riddle simply steps back into Ginny, not as a parasite now, but as a co-pilot. Her eyes snap open, green, then brown, then an unsettling, layered hue, and together they retreat deeper into the tunnels, beyond the known chamber, into catacombs even the founders treated as rumour. Down there, the diary is no longer a mere anchor, it is a laboratory. Riddle uses the basilisk's corpse as a conduit, leeching the lingering enchantments in its bones, binding Ginny's bloodline to the runes carved into the stone centuries earlier. The result is a crude lattice prototype, a web of soul resonance stretching between Horcrux, host, and castle. Hogwarts, long treated as a benevolent fortress, begins to answer to a different authority. On the surface, the narrative limps toward familiarity. Fawkes arrives at last, tears away the venom, and Harry survives to mumble a half-coherent account. The adults descend, find only a dead serpent and disturbed wards, and decide the diary must have been destroyed in the chaos. In the Slytherin timeline, this is the first and most consequential miscalculation. The horror that follows is almost entirely offstage. Whispers thicken in the walls, no longer the idle gossip of portraits, but layered murmurs in Parseltongue. Students from every house begin reporting the same dreams. Endless corridors, a boy with Ginny's hair and Tom Riddle's smile offering them power if they just keep walking. The staircases misalign more often, but always in ways that favour those with Slytherin ancestry. Subtle, deniable, yet accumulating into methodical certainty that the castle itself is choosing a side. By the time Dumbledore realises the diary was never actually pierced, the magic surrounding it has matured. What was once breakable by fang or fiend fire is now woven into Hogwarts' own ward structure. To burn it out would be to tear holes in the lattice that holds the school together. Destroying the Horcrux now would not be a clean exorcism. It would be a magical detonation, a shockwave through every soul it has quietly touched. And in the midst of this, one student begins to hear a voice more clearly than the rest. Perhaps it is Draco, resentful and ambitious, feeling the castle lean toward his blood. Perhaps it is Ginny, half remembering blackouts and waking with ink-stained hands. The voice is calm, almost kind, promising that the only way to save Hogwarts from collapse is not to resist the lattice, but to help complete its evolution. The weapon being polished in the dark may not be Harry this time. It may be the child who answers when Tom Riddle calls. Off-screen wars, How a missing victory rewrites the 1990s. The year after Ginny answers, history begins to drift on a visible axis. By September 1993, Hogwarts is not yet a battlefield, but it is no longer neutral ground. The walls remember Riddle's presence. In this timeline, the diary is gone, but not early enough, and the lattice he began to sketch across pipes and passageways keeps humming in the stone, an unfinished spell still looking for its author. Day to day, it manifests as a quiet darkening. Peeves avoids the second-floor corridor with something uncharacteristically like fear. Portraits fall silent when certain names are spoken. Filch's chains rust in geometric patterns that match the chamber's mosaics. Students sleep, but the castle does not. It dreams in Parseltongue. What the staff reads as post-traumatic residue is, in truth, soul resonance, an echo of Tom Riddle's will, waiting for a body to step back into. By 1994-95, the Triwizard Tournament arrives into a school already leaning toward that will. The world believes the tasks are pageantry and international cooperation. They are wrong. For Voldemort's Wraith, the tournament is a rebirth ritual. For the semi-independent diary Riddle, it is a calibration test. Each task becomes a data point: how dragons respond to compulsion, how the maze's wards distort fear, how far the lattice can reach through foreign enchantments without detection. The goblet does not merely choose champions, it measures them as potential nodes. When the graveyard ritual concludes, Voldemort returns not into a vacuum, but into competition. The wraith that has waited for 13 years and the diary echo that has spent 2 years quietly colonizing Hogwarts do not simply merge, they negotiate. The result is a fused Lord Voldemort, whose youthful cunning is grafted onto ancient cruelty, a masterpiece to be molded now by his own hand rather than accident. The Slytherin timeline acquires a general who remembers being a prefect and a warlord simultaneously. The war, therefore, does not wait for 1996. It seeps forward. Ginny Weasley, denied clean closure, spirals deeper. Every blackout she cannot explain corrodes her trust in her family. Molly and Arthur fracture over blame, the Burrow's kitchen losing its gravitational pull. The Order of the Phoenix reforms without its emotional hearth, more efficient on parchment, less resilient in the cold. Each small victory Voldemort wins, an ambush here, a silenced witness there, feeds the lattice's growing appetite, teaching it that fear itself is a resource. By the time the Department of Mysteries battle erupts, the war has already matured. When the prophecy sphere shatters, it is not only glass that breaks. The words never fully spoken ricochet through the lattice. For one impossible second, every Horcrux in Britain sinks. Harry feels his scar burn, his ribs seize, his vision split, an internal fortress briefly under siege from its own foundations. The unspeakables will later log unmeasurable magical turbulence. They will have no language for what occurred. From that moment, delay becomes lethal. Each year the Horcruxes persist. They learn. Each attempt to destroy one risks feeding the network instead of crippling it. When Dumbledore finally turns with methodical certainty to systematic Horcrux hunting, he is already years behind a clock he does not know exists. The question is no longer whether they can be destroyed, but whether By the time he swings the sword, the locket and the ring and the fragments beyond have turned every act of destruction into an attack on Harry's own soul, a weapon being polished in the dark, aimed inward. In this world, victory is not merely uncertain, it may already be mathematically impossible. Dumbledore's miscalculation, the locket that corrupts too deeply, the cave is not the mistake. The delay is. In this timeline, Dumbledore still bleeds his way across that subterranean lake, still drinks poison until his hands shake and his breath rasps, still closes his fingers around the counterfeit locket with the methodical certainty of a man who believes information is the highest currency in war. He returns to Hogwarts not with a relic to be shattered, but with a question to be studied, catalogued, understood. They are wrong to imagine that caution is always a virtue. In the Slytherin timeline, the locket is not inert metal waiting for basilisk venom. It is a maturing organ in Voldemort's distributed body, already humming with soul resonance. Every hour Dumbledore spends probing its wards, cross-referencing its enchantments, and searching for RAB's trail is an hour in which the lattice quietly rewrites its own rules, knitting the fragment tighter, deeper, closer to the one compatible vessel it has already tasted in the Department of Mysteries. By the time the trio are camping under a sky that feels more like a lid than a canopy, the locket is no longer a background malignancy. It is an active predator. Its whispers, once generalized venom about weakness and betrayal, become scalpel precise. Bellatrix's voice dissecting Harry's loyalties, Voldemort's laughter braided with Dumbledore's disappointment, Hermione's imagined contempt recited in Hermione's own cadence. The illusion in the forest does not merely show Harry and Hermione entwined, it shows Bellatrix watching, approving, murmuring that he was always a masterpiece to be moulded, never a boy. The body begins to pay. When Harry's temper spikes, his nosebleeds are sudden, violent, leaving black-red spatters on the snow that steam in the cold. When he resists the impulse to put the locket back on after watch, there are momentary blackouts, stutters in consciousness, where he loses 5 seconds and wakes with his hand halfway to the chain. The Horcrux is no longer simply corrupting his thoughts. It is testing the structural integrity of his soul. Hermione notices first, of course. In a ruined Muggle factory, the walls scorched and the windows boarded like a fallen fortress, she snaps, while Ron sleeps and Harry stares at the locket on a broken conveyor belt. She conjures fiend fire, wild, hungry, briefly glorious. For a heartbeat it works. The locket's surface buckles, the serpent's eye cracks, and a scream tears free. It rebounds. Harry drops as if struck. The scream is inside his skull, a tidal wave of Voldemort's memories. The Alpine Orphanage Gardens from Tom's Height, the taste of Hepzibah Smith's cocoa, the first kill, the ring's placement, the diary's satisfaction as Ginny's pulse weakens. When the fire is finally smothered, the locket is damaged but intact, and Harry is left with the residue of foreign rage that does not fully fade. His magic flares hotter, harsher. His occlumency walls, once disciplined, now feel like a weapon being polished in the dark, turned inward as often as out. Here, the new rule crystallizes. The locket has matured past simple extraction. Any attempt to unmake it now will not merely eject a fragment from Voldemort, it will tear along the line of greatest resonance through the nearest compatible soul. Through Harry, whatever survives will bear scars no potion can knit, no spell can soothe. Dumbledore realizes this too late, watching Harry sleep in the headmaster's office. After a forced return, the old man feels it, not just corruption, but revision. Each day the locket endures. It is not merely shielding Voldemort's immortality, it is rewriting Harry, line by line, into an architecture the headmaster no longer fully understands, and may soon be unable to control. The Dark Lord upgraded, fusion, ritual, and the new immortal. Dumbledore is not the only one who feels the revision. Far below the headmaster's office, in the echoing silence of the chamber that once birthed him, another consciousness stirs. The world thinks Voldemort returned in that graveyard cauldron, flesh knitted by blood and bone and stolen will. They are wrong. In this timeline, the ritual of the goblet does not resurrect a single tyrant. It summons a committee of himself. The cauldron boils, the bone dissolves, Harry's blood hisses against the rim, and the wraith that has haunted forests and parasitized hosts pulls itself inward. Canon remembers this as a linear ascent, wraith to body, weakness to power. But the diary that survived Ginny's death long enough to mature in Hogwarts walls, and the locket that has been feeding on Harry's private despairs, do not simply melt back into their maker. They negotiate. 16-year-old Riddle, preserved in ink and adolescent certainty, brings clarity, charisma, and unfractured ambition. The older Voldemort brings raw, magical authority and the brutal calculus of war. The result is not a man restored, it is a merger. Soul resonance becomes contract law. Each fragment retains perspective. Each can veto the others. The body that rises in the graveyard is an arbitration result, a dark consensus stitched from arguments only one mind can have with itself. In this fused state, Voldemort is colder, less theatrical, and, fatally for the world, more patient. He has, for the first time since his Alpine orphanage dreams, a long-term plan that is not merely domination, but optimization. That plan culminates not at Hogwarts, but in the Department of Mysteries at the end of Order of the Phoenix, where in this Slytherin timeline, the jewel above the veil is only the overture. Under the unspeakable's unblinking orreries, he enacts a second ritual. Nagini coiled in a carved blood circle, Harry's blood drawn again by force, and a reclaimed Horcrux, often the locket, glimmering with parasitic history, placed at the center. The incantation does not create new anchors, it forges a lattice. Each fragment is bound not only to the central soul, but to each other, a network of mutual regeneration. Destroy one, and the others surge, backfilling the wound with borrowed identity. Mythically speaking, Voldemort ceases to be a man with anchors and becomes a storm with eyes. His awareness is distributed across cursed objects, across Nagini's predatory patience, across the thin lightning scar in Harry's mind. Every failed assassination, every destroyed Horcrux, returns to him as data. He updates his defenses with methodical certainty, a dark magical algorithm, running constant iterations on survival. The consequence is temporal dislocation. The Second Wizarding War begins earlier, but with an enemy who learns in real time. When Harry finally destroys a Horcrux now, driving basilisk-poisoned steel through a cup, or casting fiend fire against a diadem. He is not peeling away immortality. He is slamming a door Voldemort has already walked through, severing access to a room the storm no longer needs. And as Harry, a weapon being polished in the dark, realizes this, the true horror surfaces. What exactly has his own scar been teaching the storm in return? Nagini and the point of no return, when killing the snake isn't enough. Hogwarts is no longer a school. It is a fortress in siege mode, its towers burning like torches, thrust into the throat of the dark. In this timeline, the Battle of Hogwarts is not a desperate last stand by scattered resistance, but the calculated endgame of a strategist who has spent years mapping every stair, every secret passage, every wand arm in the castle. Harry moves through it wounded, methodical, and terrifyingly calm. A weapon being polished in the dark, now chipped at the edges. The corridors echo with jewel cries and collapsing stone. His ribs grind when he breathes. His magic tastes of iron and ash. Whether Neville is at his side, or Harry has already dispatched him ahead as a decoy blade, the objective is the same, articulated with clinical precision. Isolate Nagini, sever the final anchor, render Voldemort mortal by methodical certainty. They are wrong. Unknown to Harry, the war shifted weeks earlier in a cellar thick with incense and old blood. Voldemort, guided by the accumulated data of years of failed deaths, performed a final blood ritual over Nagini, flaying a strip of his own essence, threading it through the Horcrux network and reclassifying her. She ceases to be a structural pillar and becomes a symbolic node in the lattice, a visible sacrifice wired to trigger alarms rather than collapse. In the Slytherin timeline, Nagini is no longer the last brick in the wall. She is the canary wired into the mine. When Harry finally reaches her, coiled behind a shattered window in the astronomy tower, or encased in a shimmering shield near the entrance hall, the moment feels preordained. The air hums with soul resonance. Every previous Horcrux kill is present in the room as muscle memory and trauma. The sword of Gryffindor, heavy in his hand, has drunk basilisk venom, diary ink, and locket rot. It knows what comes next. Steel falls. Nagini's death scream is not a sound but a pressure wave, a shriek that seems to vibrate along the nerves of the world. It is answered, impossibly, by a distant chorus, the diary's echoing hiss, the locket's rattling sob, the diadem's thin, furious keen. For a heartbeat, it feels as though reality itself is unspooling. But the resonance does not drain outward into Voldemort. It rebounds, like a curse striking a shield. It hits Harry. The backlash tears at the scar in his forehead, at the half-forgotten Horcrux coiled there, at the seams of a soul already overextended by death and return. He tastes burning parchment, grave dirt, and cold water from the cave where the locket died. His knees hit stone, his wand arm spasms. Something inside him begins to peel away. Across the courtyard, Voldemort staggers. For an instant, the world sees what it has always wanted. The Dark Lord faltering, grasping at his chest, eyes wide with something very close to fear. Then he straightens, breathes, tests his limbs like a duelist flexing a newly healed wrist. The pain is real, the loss is real, but the core architecture holds. The experiment worked. Harry feels it at the same time. Not victory, but a sickening absence where triumph should be. Nagini's destruction has rung the lattice like a bell, but the tower still stands, and the vibrations are tearing his own foundations apart. He has fulfilled the prophecy's surface reading. He has the power to vanquish the Dark Lord, but he has wielded it years too late, against a system that has already adapted, learned, evolved on his pain. The true cost of killing the snake will not be extracted from Voldemort. It will be taken, piece by deliberate piece, from Harry Potter's unraveling soul. The boy who was a Horcrux, backlash, breakdown, and soul collapse. The backlash does not arrive as pain. It arrives as subtraction. In the frozen second after Nagini's head leaves her body, or, in a darker variation of this Slytherin timeline, after the locket finally yields years too late, the world does not roar in triumph. It goes narrow and sharp and silent. Harry's scar burns, yes, but the burn is only the surface symptom of something far more precise. A sensation of threads being yanked out of his mind, as if an invisible hand has found the seams of his consciousness and is unpicking them with methodical certainty. Canon insists the Horcruxes merely die when struck by basilisk venom or fiend fire. They are wrong. In this timeline, the Horcrux network has matured into a lattice, a distributed, self-correcting architecture of soul resonance, designed not just to anchor Voldemort to the world, but to redistribute damage, to absorb catastrophe, and bleed it across multiple anchors, until no single blow is fatal. It is a fortress built of sin and contingency, and one of its load-bearing walls has just attacked another. The paradox is elegant and cruel. Harry is a node in the lattice, an unintended fragment housing Voldemort's will. Nagini, or the locket worn against his chest, like a cursed medal, is another. When one node destroys another, the system cannot root the damage away from the attacker. It folds in on itself, seeking equilibrium, and finds the only shared medium available, the common soul between them. The backlash does not strike Voldemort's distant body, it detonates inside Harry. The collapse begins as images, intrusive, staccato, tactically lethal in their intimacy. A boy in an orphanage corridor, watching other children be chosen and taken away. A prefect badge, polished until it gleams like a promise. Ink sliding across a diary page. Tom Riddle's careful script, inviting confession. Nagini as woman, trapped in her own skin, hearing Parseltongue as both salvation and sentence. Nagini a serpent, tasting air thick with blood and command. These are not visions projected into Harry's mind. They are memories bleeding into his identity, grafted with such fidelity that he cannot easily distinguish which Christmas was his and which belonged to the boy who would become the Dark Lord. Pattern interrupt. For a heartbeat, Harry forgets his own name. Not literally, but functionally. Harry Potter ceases to be a stable center and becomes one narrative strand among several. The Alpine winters with Bellatrix, the Lestrange estate corridors, Draco's hesitant loyalty. These now sit beside the diary's long, hungry years in a schoolgirl's satchel and the locket's quiet hatred at the bottom of a cave lake. The lattice, in collapsing, has cross-wired its archives. Dumbledore once believed that destroying the fragment in Harry would be an act of surgical mercy. In this timeline, they are wrong again. Harry's act of destruction has not simply killed a Horcrux, it has inverted his role. The soul shock tears at the parasitic fragment inside him. But instead of dying cleanly, it reacts like a living organism under attack. It roots deeper, sending filaments through every fresh fracture in his psyche, using the damage as fertile soil. The more he resists, the more surface area he gives it. The result is not possession in the theatrical sense. It is colonization, a quiet redrawing of borders. As the battle noise slowly fades back into his hearing, Harry understands the final irony with cold, academic clarity. He has done what the world begged him to do. Destroyed a Horcrux, struck a decisive blow in the war, and in doing so, he may have made himself the most stable, most dangerous anchor Voldemort has left. The boy who was a Horcrux has not been freed. He has been consolidated, and somewhere on the field, Voldemort turns toward him, not with fear, but with recognition of a masterpiece to be molded. Negotiating with power, Dumbledore, Harry, and the price of being late. The confrontation does not happen in the Great Hall, or on a battlefield, or before witnesses hungry for legend. It happens in the fracture. In the instant after the Horcrux dies too late, Harry is thrown sideways out of the world, away from stone and blood and screaming, into a liminal white expanse that is not King's Cross and yet remembers it. The air hums with soul resonance. The floor is suggestion rather than matter. Ahead of him, like a ruin imported into eternity, stands the shattered silhouette of the headmaster's office. Rafters broken, portraits empty, the great desk cleaved in two. Dumbledore waits amid the wreckage, hands folded, expression stripped of twinkle. He has seen the lattice now, has watched Voldemort's anchors evolve past simple objects into a distributed architecture of survival. In this timeline, the old man finally understands that the boy before him is no longer merely a vessel. He is a junction. He speaks first of concern, of duty, of the war. His words are gentle. His intent is not. As Harry steps closer, there is the barest shift in the white around them, like a curtain drawn tighter. And Dumbledore moves. A subtle pressure at the edge of Harry's thoughts. A feather-light legilimency probe, the same methodical certainty with which he has assessed allies and weapons for decades. They are wrong, those who imagine legilimency as a duel of wands and shouted incantations. At this level, it is a raised eyebrow, a softened tone, a question about how you are feeling. Harry feels it, and for the first time, something that is not Bellatrix and not Hogwarts, but undeniably his own answers back. The backlash from the Horcruxes' delayed destruction has wired his mind along Voldemort's old fault lines, honed his occlumency to a tactically lethal edge. The probe hits a wall, not a passive shield, but a precise cold interception. "Don't," Harry says, and the white around them darkens by a shade, as if the word itself carries authority here. The negotiation begins. Dumbledore argues from principle and arithmetic. Voldemort remains. The Horcruxes, those that still matter, remain, and Harry's life is still the most efficient currency. He outlines the familiar equation, a willing sacrifice, the unraveling of protections, the end of a war that has already cost too much. In the Slytherin timeline, he frames death as strategy, not martyrdom. Harry listens, but he has run his own numbers. "You're assuming my death empties the vault," he replies, voice measured. "But the lattice has already matured. Kill the host now, and you may just knock the last stable anchor loose into the world, without a body to contain it." To punctuate the point, the ruined office shifts. On the broken desk, an object resolves from the white. The invisibility cloak edges unnaturally sharp against the haze, a relic of a family he never knew, a promise of safety that has never truly applied to him. For a heartbeat, his composure cracks, the mask Bellatrix taught him to wear, slipping as memory and possibility collide. He could hide, he could run, he could become, in earnest, a weapon being polished in the dark, answerable to no one. The cloak flutters, revealing the resurrection stone resting beneath it like an accusation. Harry's gaze lingers there, and in that lingering is the fear he will not name, that in mastering death, in bargaining with souls and anchors and lattices, he is walking Voldemort's path with cleaner rhetoric. "I will fight," he says at last, eyes leaving the stone, settling on Dumbledore with an almost surgical calm. "I will destroy what I can, but you do not get to spend my soul like a weapon anymore. Not when we both know the clock ran out years ago." The white space tightens, the ruined office flickers, and somewhere beyond this fracture, something in Voldemort reacts. The negotiation is not over. It has barely begun. Battlefield of ghosts, a war of stalemate and slow corruption. The office shatters into aftermath. By the time the echo of that negotiation reaches the stones below, the Battle of Hogwarts is already ending in a way no prophecy ever anticipated. Voldemort falls. Visibly, theatrically, wand blasted from his hand, body ruptured by converging curses and the stone's backlash. But when his shell hits the flagstones, the castle does not exhale. The air remains tight, charged, as if the war itself is holding its breath and refusing to die. Because in this timeline, the Horcruxes did not die cleanly. They matured. The locket, the ring, the cup, each destroyed years after its intended window, has already sunk deep tendrils into the lattice, that invisible mesh of soul resonance, binding wand, wizard, and place. When Harry and Hermione carved through them with basilisk venom and fiendfire, they were not uprooting anchors. They were amputating visible branches from a root system that had long since fused with the world. So Voldemort's body breaks. His conscious will is driven back, perhaps even briefly disembodied, but the resonance does not collapse. Curses still skid across the rubble with his unmistakable signature. Death Eaters, who should be leaderless, wake screaming from shared visions of a formless commander. Certain corridors, moaning Myrtle's bathroom, the third-floor landing where Quirrell once bled, develop a pressure in the silence, as if the castle itself remembers being a fortress for a different master. Publicly, the Ministry declares victory. There are speeches, medals, a carefully choreographed photograph of Harry standing amid the ruins with the Elder Wand lowered. The prophet prints the headline, "The Dark Lord is gone. They are wrong." Behind the ceremony, portraits whisper of cold presences pacing empty rooms at night. A first year in Wales is born with a serpent-shaped birthmark that burns when she passes Nocturne Alley. Old cursed artifacts that should yield to goblin silver and dragon fire simply hold, their cores humming with a familiar, thin laughter. Curse breakers begin filing quiet reports. Certain magics now refuse the final unraveling, as if some higher authority has claimed veto power over entropy. Harry becomes that authority's counterweight, not a hero. A wardstone where he walks, the lattice quiets, wands miscast fewer unforgivables, possessed objects fall dormant, the ambient pressure in haunted corridors thins. In this Slytherin timeline, the boy who lived is reduced to an instrument of containment, a weapon being polished in the dark not for conquest, but for indefinite maintenance of a damaged equilibrium. The price is intimate and brutal. Every day spent suppressing that resonance leeches years from his lifespan and hours from his sanity. Migraines become blackouts. Dreams become shared battlefields, where he and the residual Voldemort echo circle each other without ever landing a killing blow. The Order fractures around him. One faction, led by a hardened Hermione and Cursebreakers who think in equations, argues that Harry must be excised. Horcrux remnants, lattice bonds, everything, no matter the cost. Better one catastrophic ritual now than centuries of subliminal corruption. The other, veterans who watched Voldemort adapt with methodical certainty, fear that carving Harry free will merely snap the remaining fragments back together, reconstituting a Voldemort no longer fragmented, but fully integrated, tactically lethal, and no longer tethered to a single body at all. So the war does not end, it freezes. What follows is a magical Cold War, an uneasy generation raised in the shadow of a Dark Lord who is never entirely present and never entirely gone. Children learn defensive rituals the way their parents learned arithmetic. Aura's patrol not for armies, but for fluctuations in invisible pressure, spikes in soul resonance that suggest the lattice testing its cage. Harry, aging too fast, becomes both shield and warning, a living reminder that destroying a Horcrux too late does not close a story. It suspends it indefinitely over an abyss that no one knows how to cross, and somewhere in the quiet between heartbeats, the lattice continues to think. Alternate endings, corrupted savior, eternal stalemate, or Voldemort victorious. The world assumes that once a cage exists, the monster inside is contained. In this timeline, the lattice proves them wrong. It merely waits, calculating, while human lives rearrange themselves around its invisible geometry. One possible ending unfolds with a terrible, methodical certainty. Harry survives the initial backlash of destroying a Horcrux too late, but the effort brands him permanently as a conduit rather than a conqueror. Every flare of Voldemort's will now echoes through him as pain, insight, and temptation. To keep the lattice suppressed, he centralizes authority, outlaws certain branches of magic, and authorizes preemptive obliteration of bloodlines that trend toward fanaticism. The wizarding world becomes objectively safer. There are fewer raids, fewer massacres, fewer cursed summers. Yet the price is a savior who has internalized his enemy's logic, who treats every rebellion as a nascent Dark Lord to be erased before it matures. In this corrupted savior endgame, Harry is no longer a boy who won a war. He is a weapon being polished in the dark by necessity and fear, a masterpiece to be molded by the pressure of an immortal enemy he can never fully kill. Hogwarts hardens into a fortress, its curriculum a quiet indoctrination in strategic obedience. The Slytherin timeline completes its arc. The child Bellatrix, raised to outthink monsters, becomes the most efficient monster handler the world has ever seen. A second path refuses resolution altogether. Here, the lattice reacts to every decisive blow with perfect, malign balance. Harry destroys a Horcrux, and the remaining anchors deepen their soul resonance with Voldemort. Voldemort gains ground, and Harry's link intensifies, granting him predictive flashes that allow desperate countermoves. No final battle ever arrives. Instead, there are cycles, 5 years of uneasy peace, then a summer of dark marks over coastal villages, a decade of reform, then a sudden resurgence of masked raids, led by yet another resurrected lieutenant. Children grow up learning evacuation drills, alongside basic charms. Pension plans include war clauses. The prophecy, once a singular fulcrum, dissolves into background noise as both sides are trapped in an eternal stalemate. Tactically lethal, yet strategically meaningless, victory becomes a myth older generations talk about in the same tone they use for dragons. The third ending is brutally simple. Harry misjudges the cost. Destroying a key Horcrux too late tears his already compromised soul. He begins to fail in small, almost bureaucratic ways. Missed meetings, spells that fizzle, occlumency walls that leak. By the time he understands that the backlash is killing him faster than Voldemort, it is already over. He dies, with one anchor still maturing in some forgotten vault, another hidden in the bones of an institution he never suspected. Voldemort learns. He does not return as a theatrical warlord, but as an administrator, threading himself through law, curriculum, and commerce. The tyranny that follows is quieter, more procedural, and far harder to uproot because it looks, on parchment, like order. Across all 3 endings, the tragedy is not merely that evil persists or that good corrodes. It is that timing, knowledge withheld, warnings ignored, actions delayed, converts heroism into elegant futility. The right choices arrive just late enough to be almost irrelevant. Which of these conclusions feels most realistic for this world? And what does that suggest about Canon's dependence on perfectly timed courage and impossibly narrow windows of grace, rewriting the prophecy? Too late as the hidden line, Canon leans on a comforting illusion that Trelawney's prophecy is about who Harry is, not when he acts. The world remembers only the headline clauses. Born as the 7th month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal. Neither can live while the other survives, and quietly edits out everything that does not fit a morality play about chosen identity. They are wrong. In this timeline, the prophecy is not just a character sketch. It is a clock disguised as poetry. Listen to it again, not as mystic nonsense, but as hostile legalese. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. Canon readings obsess over the one and equal, over bloodlines and scars, while ignoring the buried implication that approaches and survives are temporal markers, hinting at thresholds beyond which the magic ossifies. The alternate reading is brutally simple. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord is not the strongest wizard, but the only one positioned to strike within a narrow window before Voldemort's Horcrux network stabilizes into a closed lattice, before soul resonance between anchors and host becomes irreversible. Power, here, is not raw magical output. It is proximity to a vanishing opportunity. Dumbledore, in Canon, treats Horcruxes as static abominations, horrific, but fundamentally the same whether they are 1 year old or 50. In the Slytherin timeline, that assumption is his fatal miscalculation. Voldemort's experimental soul magic does not merely linger, it matures. The diary that once siphoned Ginny Weasley in a damp chamber is, by the time Harry reaches for basilisk venom, a nearly completed vessel, a weapon being polished in the dark, already learning to live without its creator. The locket's malevolence thickens, the ring's curse grows more recursive, Nagini's bond deepens until serpent and master are a single magical organism. The tragedy is not that Dumbledore trusted Snape, or that he withheld too much from Harry. The deeper failure is chronological. He underestimated the speed at which Voldemort's fragmented soul would adapt once scattered, how quickly those anchors would interlock into a fortress of self-sustaining immortality. He read the prophecy as biography when it was, in truth, a countdown. Harry's canon heroism crystallizes in one act, walking into the forest at precisely the right moment, offering his life when that sacrifice can still reset the board. In this timeline, he is no less willing. He stands in the same clearing, under the same indifferent stars, and opens himself to death with the same methodical certainty. But the lattice has already completed. His courage collides with a system that no longer cares. Here is the quiet devastation. Prophecies do not warn about clocks. They name players, not deadlines. The war was always going to hinge not only on who Harry was, but on when he moved. And no one, not even the boy raised as a masterpiece to be molded into perfect obedience to destiny, fought to ask the magic whether approaches had already become too late. And when the killing curse falls and the world does not reset, the error becomes undeniable. What this AU reveals about Canon, Harry, and Voldemort. Canon spares us that error. Its Horcrux destructions are almost unnervingly clean. A sword, a fang, a fire, and the world obligingly updates its save file. In Rowling's construction, there is a moral physics at work, a quiet theorem that says, if evil is confronted decisively and in time, the universe will still accept the correction. In this timeline, that theorem fails. The diary is not a school year inconvenience, but a long, slow infection. The locket is not a miserable camping trophy, but a generator of despair left humming for years. By letting a Horcrux mature beyond its narrative window, the Slytherin timeline exposes what Canon politely implies but never tests, that there might be a point at which soul magic stops being reversible bookkeeping and becomes a new equilibrium, a dark conservation law. Seen from that angle, Voldemort's greatest unrealized potential is not simply as the man who shredded his soul, but as a dark innovator who almost discovered a different mode of existence. The diary in Chamber of Secrets already hints at this. Tom Riddle pulling mass and will from Ginny, approaching molecular density, edging toward independence. If that process is allowed to complete, if soul resonance is given years instead of months, Voldemort is no longer merely hiding from death. He is prototyping a distributed self, a magical network of anchors, each evolving towards sentience. Canon kills the experiment early. This AU lets it run. Against that backdrop, Harry's canonical victories look less like inevitable triumphs of virtue and more like acts of timing, as much as courage. The diary is destroyed in second year before its echo of Tom can fully step into the world. The ring and the locket fall before the final campaign, trimming away backup bodies before the last battle can truly begin. Nagini dies in the final possible window, where her death still updates the metaphysical ledger. The pattern is brutal in its simplicity. Harry wins because he is just early enough every time. The too late scenario functions, therefore, as a shadow commentary on delay, on personal procrastination, institutional denial, and the cost of underestimating emergent threats. The ministry that calls Voldemort's return rumour, the board of governors that treats the chamber as legend, even Dumbledore's measured silences. In canon, these failures are rescued by Harry's punctual desperation. Here, they are not. The damage is baked in. The war is fought inside a fortress of consequences, already hardened around both sides. And that is the real function of an alternate history like this. It is not merely a grim thought experiment or an excuse to watch the world burn more aesthetically. It is a lens by watching Horcruxes ripen into something tactically lethal, by seeing a weapon being polished in the dark become uselessly late rather than perfectly aimed. We see the original story's stakes and structure with sharper clarity. The next step is to follow that clarity to its end. What a world looks like when even victory can no longer mean what it did on the page. If the clock could be reset, your turn in the Wizarding War. In this timeline, that clarity cuts in only one direction. Delay is the true Dark Lord. Harry does destroy a Horcrux. He does everything the legends say he should, but he does it years too late, after the anchor has ripened past vulnerability into permanence, after Voldemort has rewritten his own soul resonance around the wound and turned the original flaw into armor. The world believes Horcruxes are binary, intact or destroyed, immortal or mortal. They are wrong. Here, each year of survival lets an anchor mature, bleed into the wards around it, lace itself into Hogwarts stone or forest root or human bone, until destroying it no longer erases a life, only shifts the balance of pain. Every strike Harry lands still lands, but the cost is quietly inverted. The damage that should have shredded Voldemort's soul shears his instead, leaving the Dark Lord incrementally freer and the boy who fights him incrementally hollowed. This is the central image of the Slytherin timeline, applied to a different war, not Harry against a single, snake-faced tyrant, but Harry against a clock no one knew was ticking. Spells, relics, basilisk venom, fiend fire, these remain tactically lethal, yet timing itself becomes the most decisive weapon on the field. A silent curse that has already been cast before the first wand is raised. So the question turns back to you. If you could reach into this war, and move one action earlier, reset one gear in the mechanism, what would you touch? Do you burn the diary on its first appearance, before it can ferment in Ginny's hands and before Riddle's shade learns to adapt? Do you force Dumbledore to reveal the Horcrux truth to an 11-year-old Harry, accepting the psychological shrapnel in exchange for years of preparation? Do you sabotage Voldemort's final lattice ritual, the moment he upgrades his anchors from crude containers to a distributed network humming beneath the skin of Britain itself? Choose your fulcrum, then follow its consequences with methodical certainty. In the comments, name the Horcrux you would make the too late anchor, the diary that becomes a second headmaster in the walls, the locket that metastasizes into a curse on bloodlines, Nagini, whose death no longer matters, or Harry himself, whose delayed realization turns every subsequent victory into a slow suicide. Do you see a path, even now, to a true victory, a clean severing of Voldemort's power? Or has the window already closed, locking this world into an elegant stalemate of mutual ruin? Because in wars of magic, and in our own world alike, the question is never just, what will you do? But, will you do it in time? If you want to keep testing that question across other timelines, where a decision made 1 hour earlier or 1 year later redraws the map of the wizarding world-like this video, subscribe to the channel and move right now into the next what if, where the clock and the war begin again.